North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary, but that's just my opinion. It's just as valuable as yours. And we debate because opinions are worthy of debate. So join us. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So yesterday, President Biden got the very good news from the Democrat National Committee that there would be no primary campaign debates for the president and anybody trying to run in the primaries against the president. Now, obviously, this is going to be something that is probably not going to stand because perhaps someone in the news media will say, well, let's stage a debate with the remaining candidates for the Democrat national nomination. And the thing about that is that would leave the president out and provide fodder for Republicans to say, hey, you know what? The president can't debate. That's my question. Can the president debate? Can he debate on national television on the fly? Yes or no, and why? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Gary refers to President Biden as President's sock puppet. Is that true? Can the president debate? On the other side of the coin, will the former president debate? That's the question. Will the former president debate? And that may not necessarily be in the cards either. Let me explain. Donald Trump threw the prospect of presidential debates into doubt, saying he might not participate and complained about moderators and venues. I see that everybody's talking about the Republican debates, but nobody got my approval or the approval of the Trump campaign before announcing them. The Republican National Committee, which has been negotiating with the GOP presidential campaigns, has announced partial plans for 2 debates, August in Milwaukee and a later one at the Ronald Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. No specific dates have been set. In suggesting he might not attend, Trump has said he has a big lead in the polls and questioned why he'd want to subject himself to hostile networks with Trump and MAGA-hating anchors. Trump ended his statement by noting the publisher of the Washington Post is an officer with the Reagan Library Foundation, and followed that with a single word: no. So, are we going to go through a primary season with no debates, at least debates involving a sitting president and a former president? Are we going to do that? Are we really going to do that? I wonder. Telephone number 817-379-2172. Not only do I wonder, I'm trying to figure out, do we need to have these debates in the first place? I would say yes. Because we have to have people telling us what they want to do. But this brings up a couple of things. For Democrats watching this, for Democrats watching this, does the lack of a debate calendar in the primaries change your mind in any way, shape, or form? I would also like to know whether you have any problem whatsoever with President Biden's current mental state. I'm wondering if it's going to get worse. And I have a really important question regarding President Trump. And it involves you. And it involves the country. And it involves, strangely, the Democrat Party as well. Oh, the Chiron isn't on. Yeah, that's because I updated it and then forgot to play it. How about that? There you go. 817-379-2172. By the way, that's CHYRON, in case you're wondering. That was Mike trying to take care of the broadcast. Thanks very much. I edited the thing for this morning and then didn't put it up. So some of the responses so far, do you believe that President Biden is incapable of debate? Yes or no, and why? Do you believe he's incapable of debate? 817-379-2172. Poker Monkey says he's not up to it. He doesn't belong in office now, much less in the future. Do you believe that President Biden is incapable of debate? Poker also said Biden can't debate with himself about what type of oatmeal to have every morning. Okay, well, that's kind of mean. Yes, I am the spell master general. The smell master general? Did I say that? The spell master general. Yes. CHYRON. Chiron. Can President Biden debate? Is he capable of it? Answer your question, Wells. I don't think so. I don't think this president is capable of debating himself. I mean, he's capable of debating himself, but I wonder what he would debate. No, he's not capable of debating, himself. I just don't believe it. Now, that makes you wonder just exactly, again, who's making the decisions in the White House? Who's making the decisions in the White House? Where mental alacrity is concerned, who's making those decisions? I frankly don't think it's President Biden. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory, and this is not news. I'm just wondering. When the president ran in 2020, I said, you're not going to vote for Joe Biden. You're going to vote for a group of people behind Joe Biden. That's been proven. And does that even bother you? 817-379-2172. Does it bother you that a group of unelected officials is probably running the Biden administration? 817-379-2172. A lot of people say that President Biden, I did it again, President Obama is running the show from behind the scenes. I certainly would agree that there are at least many movers and shakers in the Obama administration that are probably involved in this presidium behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, I'm sorry. The Biden thing. Yeah. Mike calls it a Freudian fact. Whatever. But the thing is that does it bother you that there might be a committee making presidential decisions? And indeed, as Gary said earlier, using President Biden as a sock puppet. Do you think that's actually true? 817-379-2172. You can join us. You can join us on the chat room too. And what about Trump? Trump not taking part in the primaries? I can see why. I mean, what are news networks going to say to Donald Trump? What they're going to do is they're going to try to pull out every gotcha question in the entire inventory to try to nail Donald Trump on something. It is well known. It is well known that Fox News wants to move away from Donald Trump. I don't know what's happening to Fox News, but I think they're headed for hard times. Welcome to the Wells Report. Good to have you here. Hi.
Hey, it's Gary Olivier calling from Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Gary, it's good to have you here. Thanks very much. How's Louisiana these days?
I'm sorry, I lost you for a second.
I just asked you, how's Louisiana these days?
It's getting hot and sticky. You know how it is, and Fort Polk is the garden spot of the world. But I think, getting on the whole thing, Trump's not willing to participate. I think that's a total wrong move. I think he should be leading the charge to do that. And saying, "Hey, come on, bring it on, let's go."
Well, what about?
I think he should. I think that's the way he should handle it. I don't think he should say, "Hey, I'm not doing this. I'm taking my ball and going home."
But wait a minute. Hold on a second. But wait a second.
Yeah.
Is he going to get a fair shake in those debates?
No, but probably not. But you can't just walk away like that. You have to take it head on and say, "Hey, let's go." And you have to be better than them, and you have to beat them at their own game. I think it's a total wrong move not to participate, because now you look like President Sock Puppet here. What do you call it? Campaigning from his basement and via spliced together video presentations.
Let me ask you this. What do you think about President Biden? What do you think about the DNC decision not to have primary debates?
Well, I think it's the consortium that, of course, alleged consortium that's actually running him and running the country, because they don't want to put anybody in there that for themselves, and they know that there's a lot of opposition up there that, hey, this person's up to something, and you have to be a idiot. You don't see that.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of trouble. We're having a little bit of trouble with your phone, Gary. Thanks very much for your comments. Telephone number 817-379-2172. I've got another question about President Trump. That's going to be coming up in just a couple of seconds as we roll through the Wells Report first thing in the morning. Well, sort of first thing in the morning here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. I am concerned about our president. I'm concerned about who's making the presidential decisions. There have been clues throughout his presidency that there might be somebody else pulling the strings. Like, for example, the people that suddenly will cut away from the president in the middle of a video presentation. There are things in the media called delays, where what happens, say, for example, on a camera or on a microphone or something along that line, is said several seconds before it actually makes the air. They're well used in talk radio and so on, and have been for so long, because people say stupid stuff. But I'm almost positive that the president, at least in the early days of his presidency, faced someone dumping, which is the term you use to dump that set of seconds, or just cutting away from the president when he said something odd. So, can President Biden debate? The DNC says, no, we're not going to have any primary debates for the president. Can he even debate? Is it possible for him to? So, can President Biden debate? Will President Trump debate? That's a question too. Will President Trump debate? Should he? He will face a hostile press. And should he even bother? Our telephone number 817-379-2172. Then I have some other question regarding President Trump. We'll get that after the bottom of the hour. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of minutes. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Does anybody know what Kamala Harris is talking about? Fox News reports that the vice president was brutally mocked for puzzling comments she made during a rally for abortion rights at Howard University in Washington, D.C. That's where she graduated. And she went there on the day that President Biden announced he was going to run for re-election and take Kamala Harris with him. The VP was urging liberals to stand and fight against what she deemed a national agenda by the GOP to limit abortion rights, voting rights, and LGBTQ rights. I don't understand where they get the political mileage out of trying to limit voting rights, insofar as we've got more people voting in elections than ever before. She said, so I think it's very important, as you've heard from so many incredible leaders for it at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present and be able to contextualize it to understand where we exist in the history and the moment as it relates not only to the past, but the future. What in the hell is she talking about? It's like it's circuitous. It's like, I mean, you know, for those Star Trek fans, circuitous of Borg, you know, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. Circuitous of Borg. Yeah. So that's not the only time she's done it. That's not the only paragraph where she sort of bumbled her way through it. Here's another one that I think you might find amusing. Hopefully. Go, baby, go. That's funny. It worked just a second ago. Isn't this wonderful? Hang on just a minute here. Let me try this one more time. Okay. And the answer is no. Well, let's try it. Let's try it this way. This might work. Let's try this. That's funny. I played this once before. Try again here.
So I think it's very important, as you have heard from so many.
Hang on a second. Let me try this. Let me start this over. Let me start this over.
I think it's very important, as you have heard from so many incredible leaders, for us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present, and to be able to contextualize it, to understand where we exist in the history and in the moment as it relates not only to the past, but the future. So
I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm confused by it. What is she talking about? Anybody know? Does anybody know what she's saying? And whether and is she going to be the president of the United States? I mean, what are we doing here? Kamala Harris is someone who really concerns me because I think she's just babbling. In the incredible words of Gary from Fort Polk, Louisiana, huh? I mean, it's very likely that this woman could end up being the president of the United States. And so, are you okay with that? Think about this for just a couple of minutes. Why are the Democrats putting this slate of candidates up again? Why would they do that? You know, if I was running the Democrat Party, I'd put up Senator Manchin, and I'd put up Amy Klobuchar as his running mate. Why would you not do that? Why are you sitting here mired in this unless the people that are actually running the presidency wouldn't be the president? It would be this cabal of people behind the Oval Office. I mean, can someone explain this? Back in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us on Tuesday morning. It's Wednesday, though, so I'll be back in a minute. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. This is Wednesday. I figured out what day it was. You say, what, is he nuts? Does he not know what day it is? No. See, I have this job. I'm working at Defender Outdoors, to make ends meet as we try to get this off the ground. And it's a great job. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy both the company, the people I work with, and the work. We are quite literally at Defender Outdoors. We are protecting the Constitution, Bill of Rights, especially the Second Amendment, one Texan at a time. And it's a good job. However, my schedule starts on Tuesday. Okay? My schedule starts on Tuesday instead of Monday. And so it's strange. They're closed on Monday because we're open during the weekend, which makes sense. Anyway, so my first work day, which was yesterday, was Tuesday instead of Monday. And from time to time, I, as you know, if you watch the broadcast, there's kind of a time warp here. The time's okay, but the warp is maybe playing an outsized role. Let me ask you a couple of questions here. Donald Trump is going to run for the presidency. He has said as much, even though he's kind of in a situation where people are trying to chase him down and mess him up with, so far, bogus accusations that are very, very sketchy and very, very strange. So what I'm trying to say is I understand that President Trump is going to run, but are these distractions going to affect your voting for him? There's also something else I want to know. And I've been mulling this around in my head for the last couple of days. Would you vote for Donald Trump if he was a third-party candidate? If Donald Trump broke away from the political system that hates him. I mean, both sides hate him. The Republicans can't control him. The Democrats are afraid of him. And when I say Republicans and Democrats, I'm really not talking about you. I'm talking about the Democrat hierarchy and the Republican hierarchy. They both hate Donald Trump. And so what I'm trying to figure out is this. I'm trying to figure out whether or not Donald Trump, A, is going to stay with the Republican Party. This is something that I think is something that he should break away from. And the reason I believe he should break away from it is because the Republican Party did not support this president when he was being hammered on by the Democrat Party all throughout his presidency. So what I'm trying to figure out is the Republicans didn't support him. The Democrats are trying to lynch him, figuratively, politically. So why would he stay with the Republican Party? And that takes us back to you. If he leaves the Republican Party, would you leave to follow? In other words, would you vote for Donald Trump as a third-party candidate? 817-379-2172. Would you vote for Donald Trump if he wasn't a Republican? I believe that Donald Trump should join the Conservative Party of the United States. I believe that he should join that party, and I believe that he should run as a conservative, as opposed to a Republican, because the Republican Party is certainly not conservative. Now, Chris Grimes, who is a Democrat, says if he ran as a third-party candidate, it would only siphon votes from the Republican side and benefit Democrats. That's what everybody would say. But what I want to know is, what if Donald Trump would actually win? Thanks very much for calling. Welcome to the Wells Report. Who's this?
Hey, John David, it's Kelly, and I know I've called 2 days in a row, but I wanted to answer this question being that I'm on the Democratic side, although I vote Republican most of the time now. Yes, I would vote for him if he ran as a third party, because I don't like the Republicans any more than I do my own party. I think they're all a bunch of hypocrites. And one of the reasons why I would vote for him is a good example of what happened in Chicago on Sunday. I don't know if you saw the story or not, but two teenage boys stole a car, high-speed chase, hit a truck, killed a 6-month-old, and the DA there charged them with a misdemeanor.
Right. I did report
So-
that. I reported that yesterday on the Wells Report.
So much going on in this world. Somebody's got to take control, and there needs to be some accountability, and I think that he would bring that.
Okay, so you're a Democrat, and you
Yes.
cross party lines to vote for Donald Trump in the first place. What do
I
you
vote
think?
for the candidate, yes.
Yeah. What do you think about what do you think most Republicans would do? I mean, Trump Republicans. I'm talking about people who have voted for him a couple of times at this point. Would they
Well, I
leave?
can tell you what I talked to my U.S. representative. I actually campaigned for her, and one of the things that she and I, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I hear
One
you
of the
fine.
things that she and I spoke about was Donald Trump, and she was on that fence where she was just going to go wherever the party took her. And I told her, if that's the way you're going to be, then you don't need to be in Washington. The party does not run the people run the people. So, yeah, I'm disappointed in the Republicans. I'm disappointed definitely in my party. And you're right. They're focusing on him and not on the American people. And I'm fed up with it.
All right. Thanks very much, Kelly. I appreciate it. So telephone number 817-379-2172. So a Democrat would cross party lines and indeed go and vote for a third party candidate. A third party candidate. Chris goes on to say he won't win if he runs as a third party candidate. A third party candidate will never win. I'm not sure that's true. I'm pretty sure that if there was a third party candidate, and remember, there were a couple of third party candidates that did win. Teddy Roosevelt. Indeed, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president. And so what I'm trying to ask is I'm trying to ask Republicans. I'm talking about members of the Republican Party. Would you leave the party to vote for Donald Trump if he was, say, running in the Conservative Party? Do you believe indeed that A, Chris is right, a third party candidate could never win, or that a third party candidate would only guarantee another circumstance whereby the Democrats would profit? Do you agree with Chris? Chris Grimes says 100 years ago, well, it's more like 150 years ago. 100 years ago is your counterpoint. No, that's not my point. That's not my point. And it's Teddy Roosevelt was a member of the Bull Moose Party. He was incredibly popular. I would say that Donald Trump has that same star power. But the question that I'm trying to get answered is whether Republican voters would follow Donald Trump outside the Republican Party. Now, I made it very plain that both parties are in deep trouble. They are. And that was the issue in 1862, I believe. Because the parties were in trouble. Nobody wanted to vote for the typical fare. And so they broke away and voted for Abraham Lincoln. Same thing with Teddy Roosevelt. He was a populist. So is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a populist president. He represented somebody that the people of the United States said, you know what? We are tired of the status quo ante. We are not going to put up with this anymore. And they went out looking for a different president. And I think that people in the Republican Party are as frustrated with the party's whatever it is. I call it meanderings because I don't know what the Republican Party stands for. They used to stand for a small government and low taxes and America and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Well, what do Republicans stand for right now? I'm not sure it's anything. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that what they stand for is political expedience and political opportunism, which I've said many times in this broadcast before. That's all they stand for. So once again, if there is a third party candidate, and if that third party candidate is Donald Trump, do you believe it's possible that he could win, and would you vote for him? Yvonne, longtime friend of the Wells Report, says, I will have to do some serious thinking on that. As much as I want President Trump to win, I'm very concerned he has no chance winning as the third party candidate. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that Donald Trump is going to lose much of his 74 million person voter base that he had in the 2020 election. I don't think he has. And so bringing 74 million votes to an election that, say, for example, is more realistic from a standpoint of actually demographics voting. I mean, I still can't wrap my head around the fact that, according to just basic numbers, that either there was a close to 75% turnout, if you use 2020 census numbers, for registered voters in the United States, some 203 million, or more likely, the 165 million registered voters that were in place during the 2016 election. That would be a 94% turnout. Obviously, people who are not registered voters are voting. And what I'm trying to say is that this entire thing gives us a window on politics we've never seen before. The question is, will voters open it? Will voters open it? Yvonne also brings up another point. Her decision would very likely depend on who the Republican candidate was. Say, for example, the Republican Party just flat turns away from Donald Trump. That's not something I think they can do. I believe if the Republican Party turns away from Donald Trump, that seals their fate in 2024. Because Trump voters simply won't vote for the Republican candidate. So Yvonne says, I have friends that couldn't vote for Trump and chose a third-party candidate. Okay, yeah. So when we look at all this, does a third-party candidate, with Donald Trump being that candidate, guarantee a Democrat win? How many people there are 71% of Americans that believe that the country's on the wrong track. The guy running the show, theoretically, is President Biden. So wait a minute. Are we going to see President Biden repeat his voter performance of 81 million votes? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I don't think he has a chance to get to 81 million votes. I'm going to be surprised if he breaks 60 million votes. And so what we have is this very odd political occurrence. The majority of Democrats do not want Joe Biden to run. That's in survey after survey after survey. So would you vote for Donald Trump if he was a third-party candidate? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Would you vote for Donald Trump if indeed he was a third-party candidate? What would be the ramifications? Chris Grimes, who's a Democrat, says, well, it would guarantee a victory for the Democrat Party. How? And Chris Grimes, who's very, very adept at finding important facts, reports that President Biden received over 95% of the Democrat vote. Chris, do you think he'll get 95% this time? President Trump received 94% of the Republican vote. That's basically parity. I mean, you know, when you start thinking about the elasticity in those numbers, that's certainly within the error margin. So basically, the same percentage of voters voted for both Trump and Biden. So if President Trump runs as a third-party candidate, the Republican Party has no chance. And do you believe, Chris, that 95% of Democrats would vote for President Biden this time? Do you think he's going to have some erosion? So the Republican Party has a real problem here. If they don't support President Trump, and they haven't so far, if they don't support President Trump, then I don't see they have a chance in 2024. And if President Trump runs as a third-party candidate, if typical things happen, the Ross Perot scenario, the Republicans don't have a chance in 2024. If 71% of the people of the United States believe the country's on the wrong track, does even President Biden have a chance to win? Our telephone number 817-379-2172. Back with more in a moment. This is The Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. President Donald Trump as a third-party candidate. Donald Trump is a third-party candidate. Does he have a chance? Would you leave the Republican Party to vote for Donald Trump if he ran as a third-party candidate? I'm talking to Republicans there. So then we go back to all of the things that happened yesterday with the Democrat National Committee saying there would be no primary debates. If you're a Democrat, Chris, if you're still listening, I need to find out from you whether or not you believe that's healthy. Do you not want to see President Biden debating his primary candidate adversaries? Do you believe it would be okay for President Biden to get the Democrat nomination without having to explain why he's worth it? Mr. Love 825 says, what about Trump? Trump says he's not going to take part in Republican Party debates. And yeah, I can see that too. That's also fair. So basically what we have the two frontrunners, far and away front-running candidates that will not debate in the primary season. Is that healthy for America? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about whether or not we, the people of the United States, should be expected to vote for people that won't explain themselves. How do you explain, and also Democrats, how do you explain that so many Democrats in surveys, and surveys are useless, but let's just assume there's a shred of credibility there. Okay? How do you explain that so many Democrats don't want President Biden to run? And what do you think about President Biden, who's already declared that Kamala Harris is going to be his running mate in the 2024 campaign? Do you honestly believe that Kamala Harris is capable of being the president of the United States? I got to be honest with you. I'm not exactly sure that President Biden is going to make it out of this term. God bless him, and I'm not wishing ill on anybody. Certainly not the president. He is our president. But let me explain. This guy is deteriorating right before our eyes. That leaves the country with Kamala Harris as president. Are you okay with Kamala Harris as the president of the United States? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. If there was a legitimate challenger, yes, I'd like to see some debate, said Chris. Well, there are Democrat challengers. One of them is RFK Jr. Now, RFK has essentially damaged himself with his stance on vaccines. Because whether you believe it or not, most people think vaccines are fine. All right? They do. And so there's that. So he does have legitimate challengers, RFK Jr. Now, I don't know. I don't have any idea whether or not that there's any kind of primary credibility for RFK Jr., right? But what I'd like to see is I'd certainly like to see some sort of, all these people are standing up for the Democrat process. They're all standing up for a Democrat process, but it doesn't appear as though we're going to get one. So who would it? Marianne Williamson is somebody else. Marianne Williamson has a chance. She's run before. Yeah, it was kind of strange, but she did indeed declare herself as a Democrat challenger. I don't see her as having any kind of the political credentials that RFK Jr. has. But so, and Chris says Williamson is not a legitimate candidate. But I got to be honest with you. That's not our call. The people of the United States will make that decision. And that's what the primary process is for. But as we've seen, certainly the primary process is open to manipulation. Now, I understand why the Democrat Party has manipulated the primary process in the last two election cycles because of Bernie Sanders. The Democrat Party faced the idea that their candidate was very likely a declared socialist. And I don't believe the Democrat Party, even the Democrat Party with the progressive wing of that party, I don't believe for a moment that they wanted to be labeled as a socialist party with Bernie Sanders at the head of it. So, RFK Jr. damaged himself with his stance on vaccines. Marianne Williamson, maybe not a serious candidate. But shouldn't there be debates among those people anyway? Or are we just going to rubber stamp Joe Biden as the Democrat nominee? If so, why bother with the primary elections? You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Stick around. We'll have more coming up in the second hour as we continue to report the news, analyze the news for fact and bias, make commentary and debate. This is the Wells Report. All right, my friends. Thank you very much for your contributions this hour. We're going to be back in just a couple of seconds, so stay where you are. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We make commentary. That is not news. Commentary is just my opinion, just as valuable as yours, and so we debate. News analysis, commentary, and debate. It is the Wells Report. To continue our conversation from last hour, we're talking about the presidential race in 2024. The Democrats have Joe Biden. He has announced that he is running for re-election. Is that a good idea? If you're a Democrat, do you believe that's a good idea? Donald Trump is running for president. Do you believe that's a good idea? What I'm trying to figure out also is whether or not you, as a Republican voter, would vote for Donald Trump if he was a third-party candidate. Would that indeed seal the fate of the Republican Party in 2024? Now, we haven't necessarily seen the entire slate of candidates running for the Republican nomination. And with the DNC's decision not to have primary debates, why bother going on with the primary season? It's a foregone conclusion that Joe Biden would win that nomination, but I don't know why. More Democrats don't want him to run than want him to run. He decided to just go against that polling and run anyway. Is he even capable of it? We ask whether or not Joe Biden was capable of debating. Donald Trump, he can see no reason to debate with the Republican Party. As a matter of fact, he believes that the Republican Party, and he should, is unsupportive of him. Why would he run as a Republican Party for the same party that refused to wholeheartedly defend him against the Democrat onslaught during his first term as president? And so we have what looks like a rubber stamp candidate for the Democrat Party. Why bother going through the hassles of a primary? Indeed, just have the Democrat National Convention now nominate President Biden and let him start running for president. Let him start right now. And what goes with President Biden in his reelection? Vice President Kamala Harris. Do you, as an American, believe that Kamala Harris has what it takes to be the president of the United States? I don't think so. That's just my opinion. And so this presidential season seems to be very much up in the air. Mr. Love 825 says, well, wait a minute, they're going to rubber stamp Donald Trump as the Republican nominee. Are they? Ron DeSantis seems to have faded a bit in the public ideology since he declared, or he hasn't declared officially, but since he has been talking on the national stage. Mike Pompeo, the guy that I thought had a real chance to be president, decided to take himself out of the race. And so now we find ourselves in a position where, okay, arguably both parties have rubber stamp candidates. Is that what we want? Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. There's something else going. May 1st, 2023, there's going to be a new FHA, a Federal Housing Administration policy, that says that people who are looking to buy a house with a credit rating of 680 or higher will pay higher interest rates for their mortgage in an effort to subsidize those with lesser credit ratings, more risk, in other words, for the housing industry. In other words, if you have a good credit rating, normally your your interest rates are lower. Well, they're talking about raising them back up again to subsidize people that have low credit ratings so they can buy a house. And we saw what happened to that in 2008. But this time people with higher mortgages would be paying more money in order to, so people that have less credit rating would be able to get into the housing industry, into the housing market. Experts say the rule, people with credit scores in the neighborhood of 680 would pay another $40 a month on a $400,000 loan to subsidize higher risk mortgages. It's a policy change that has drawn criticism from both Democrats and Republicans. President Obama's former Federal Housing Administration Commissioner, David Stevens, said we can do better programs to help minorities get into home ownership. This is not the way to do it. And what are they trying to do here? What's President Biden trying to do? Why would the government of the United States have any place in the housing market? Senate Republicans said the Biden administration Federal Housing Agency or Federal Housing Finance Agency is playing politics with the U.S. housing market. Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas, 17 other GOP senators issued this warning letter to the FHFA director, Sandra Thompson, that demanded the details of how the policy would work. They go on to say this announcement, scheduled to take effect May 1st, 2023, will invert common sense risk financing at the GSEs in an effort to decrease mortgage rates for riskier individuals with low credit scores and forcibly raise rates for those with higher scores. They're talking about the government-sponsored entities Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And why is there a Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? Why are there federal agencies that are designed to help people get into the housing market? Honestly, if Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac weren't there, the housing market would indeed readjust itself. Ostensibly, both of those agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, all they do is add federal money to the housing industry. Why would housing prices go down if housing sellers can actually get a free handout from the government with a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac mortgage? The Republicans say it's short-sighted, counterproductive. It demonstrates a profound misunderstanding of the necessity of accurately tailoring housing finance products to credit risk and establishes a perverse incentive that punishes hardworking Americans for having high credit ratings. Now, that's a political statement, but it's there. And there's something else. If you want to control a populace, what do? Well, you control the money. There's a policy out by Democrats to say, for example, use a digital currency instead of an actual physical one. And that is spooky. It absolutely is. Because suddenly you don't have physical possession of your money. And there's no way for you to have physical possession of your money. You know, anybody who, like, for example, my house got hit by lightning. And so I had to make some very serious purchases, way out of my normal spending. Normally, we buy groceries, $100 or something. Buy gasoline, $100 or something. Yes, that annoys me. Small things. But when you go out and buy a washer, dryer, refrigerator, all of these things, suddenly you're spending thousands of dollars. And the bank says, whoa, maybe somebody's stolen John David's debit card. We've seen the government of the United States seek to use federal executive branch agencies, the FHA, to essentially put pressure, interfere with the housing market. We've also seen a situation whereby these other executive agencies are being used as political tools. And so if indeed there isn't a circumstance where, okay, there's not a situation where a federal or a digital national currency would not be a mess. The banks already stop transactions right in the middle. Would the government do that? And by the way, government control of the currency has always been a disaster. If you don't believe me, look up the history of the first national bank of the United States. It didn't last very long. The reason the Fed exists is because politicians play politics with the money. When we have problems, it's because the federal government has been playing around with the free enterprise system, the capitalist system, and they're doing it again. But like I said, if you're trying to control the populace, you control the money, you control food, you control medical care, and you control housing. People that are good government, shall we say, serfs, get good housing. People that, say, for example, are dissidents, they live in hovels. And we've seen this government more than willing to do that very thing. Use their political power or use their executive branch power for political reasons. Now we have the government trying to work its way into housing. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, in my view, ought to be abolished immediately. Ought to be abolished right now. This idea that people would pay higher interest rates because they have a higher credit rating to subsidize mortgages for people with lower credit ratings, that's government control of housing. We don't want that in this nation. We even did have it. Remember the housing projects of the 60s and 70s? They were disasters. And now what we're doing is we're trying to give the government more. Yvonne says, oh, by the way, while we're at it, let's get the government out of student loans. Yeah, absolutely. You don't want the government to handle education either. Because when any of these things become a matter of national policy, all of them, you have control of the populace. And that is a bad thing. As a matter of fact, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back, and I want you to, Chris is a good example of somebody that does this kind of thing, Chris Grimes. Chris, go back and find any totalitarian government that succeeded. You're saying, okay, Red China. All right, do you want to live there? See, manipulation of the marketplace is sinister. And that's what's happening in the United States right now. Again, now it's housing. They're telling us what cars to drive, what light bulbs to use, what doctor to go to. And now they want to tell you that you're going to pay for somebody else's mortgage. Telephone number 817-379-2172. What happened to America? Anybody know? Back in a moment. I like this music, this particular tune. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. When you start talking about government interference in housing, we're not just talking about mortgage rates. We're talking about where those mortgages are. The Federalist has a piece today, and it talks a little bit about migration. Stella Morabito is the author. And what she does is she points out there are two kinds of people that leave blue states and head to red states. She says refugees, people trying to get away from craziness in their liberal states, come to red states looking for a better life. I know people just like that. Then there are other kinds, and she calls them invaders. Refugees tend to assimilate. They respect the traditions of their newfound localities. Invaders want to change where they live now into something that they left for political reasons. You see, when you have the federal government in a situation where they're dabbling in the housing industry, the home mortgage industry, that's a way to move people around the country. And what if you, say, for example, have this annoying problem where there's a big red state like, Texas? When you start playing around with mortgage rates, say, hey, if you want a mortgage rate, it'll be, say, 5%. But if you move to Fort Worth, Texas, we'll make it 3.9%. Why? Because they want blue voters moving to Fort Worth and other conservative enclaves. Now, this is an assertion, but there are a lot of people leaving blue states. They're hemorrhaging residents in both New York and California. They've lost congressional seats over it. They've been reapportioned to increasingly populous red states, Florida. More specifically, 2020 census data shows a vast migration out of counties that voted for Joe Biden and into counties that voted to re-elect President Donald Trump. Large cities, suburbs, and red states tend to lean left with just as intrusive policies and election results to match. That's why refugees tend to gravitate toward rural areas. Yeah, we do. And so the point of the matter is this. If you're handling housing, if you're the government handling housing, you move people around to manipulate elections. And remember, we almost impeached and removed from office a sitting president because of election interference. That election interference thing seems to be very selective in the use of the hard charges that can lead to ruin for certain people that run afoul of them, don't you think? See, this is, okay, the word is sinister. Or do I have a black helicopter flying around in my underwear right now? Red states start going purple, one city council, one school board at a time because of the invaders coming from blue states. That's due in part to the lure of federal funds. They're actually bribes that come with woke chains attached. At the same time, rural boards of supervisors increasingly vote for off-the-wall resolutions, like, for example, ratification of the long-expired Equal Rights Amendment and all other things, too. Like, illegal immigrant sanctuary cities. Illegal in Texas. But they're still here. So do you see this, or like I said, is this just silly conspiracy theory? 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. It's Wednesday, we discovered. My calendar's all thrown off. It's really weird. Hey, we got a chat room going. You can join us, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you are watching from, say, for example, on Rumble or Patreon, this show was recorded earlier today. Thank you for joining us. Hope you find the show good. If you do, you can support it, especially on Patreon. All you really have to do is go there and throw us a buck. That's all you need. It's a buck a month, something like that. Let's see. We've been talking a little bit about the presidential race in 2024. It's something we have not seen any times in our life because both parties are in trouble. The Democrats are saturated with progressives. It's destroying the party. The Republicans, people are aware of the fact the Republican Party doesn't do anything. They don't stand for anything except for political opportunity and political expedience. Asked a little bit about President Biden running for re-election. Kamala Harris is going to be his running mate. Is Kamala Harris qualified to be the president of the United States? I don't think so. Third-party candidates. What if President Trump decides to run as a third-party candidate? What if he joins the Conservative Party? Will you do that too? Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. Then we started talking a little bit about big government power. Now they're going after money with a digital currency bill. Money, food, housing, medicine, all these things the government's trying to get into. So these are perilous times for the America that a lot of us grew up in. And will we see that continue? Well, we'll see. Another thing, what about digital ID, says Mike? Oh, yeah. You already have one. Back in the day, everybody was worried about the idea that Social Security would become a national ID. I have news. Social Security is a national ID. We all have numbers. Seriously? I'm looking at this and I'm going, I'm really concerned. I'm concerned. So what about government financing, which is $31.7 trillion under control or out of control? I think the national debt at this particular moment, because of all the spending the government is doing, is more like $33 trillion. But what's a trillion here or a trillion there? $1 trillion. $31.7 trillion of national debt. Whoa. And so the traditional kabuki theater that comes up with a debt ceiling, which is something that just absolutely annoys the living hell out of me. A nation, $31.7 trillion debt, now trying to figure out how to pay the bills that they shouldn't have incurred in the first place by raising their credit card limit. Stupid. House Republican leaders are trying to come up with a debt ceiling raising bill. They had to work with hardliners in a late night negotiating session last night. They're pressing ahead with it. They're going to do it this week. They say it raises the debt ceiling, cuts federal spending, and they've agreed on changes in order to secure passage of the most important piece of legislation so far under House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Once again, this is something that it keeps. Here I am on this broadcast, right? Discussing politics again. This is not supposed to be a political show. But how do you turn away from it? How do you turn away from a party that wants our nation to be a socialist politician's paradise? And how do you rationalize that with another political party that refuses to actually stop it? Remember what we're seeing here. We're seeing a Republican plan to raise the debt ceiling, but they should be not raising the debt ceiling. They should curtail government spending to the point where the debt ceiling is not touched. That's what they should be doing, but they're not. Once again, we have a Republican Party facilitating Democrat Party policies and ideologies. It's unbelievable. The government is turning itself into the government versus we the people, when we the people should be the government. So here we go, debt ceiling garbage. But I'm pointing out that the Republican Party obviously isn't any better than the Democrat Party when it comes to handling our money. I called it embezzlement yesterday. It's just embezzlement. That's all it is. So they're trying to get this done. They're trying to get the president on board. The touch and go nature of the vote could be seen throughout yesterday. McCarthy and others said late in the day a vote would be held this week after GOP lawmakers said a vote was expected today. When asked about the timing by Fox News on his way out of the Capitol last night, Speaker McCarthy said, "We always said we were going to vote this week. We're just working through it, and we'll take it up." GOP leaders requested change to the bill. They relented in the early hours of this morning and agreed to tweak the bill in ways they hope will secure the votes needed to get it to pass. It was not clear whether or not the votes would take place. We'll see. It's called the Limit, Save, Grow Act. It was unveiled last week over the debt limit between House Republicans and Democrats in the White House and Senate. It would cap federal spending at the fiscal year 2022 levels and increase work requirements to receive federal benefits, among other measures. It would also raise the government's borrowing limit through the end of March 2024 or by $1.5 trillion, whichever benchmark is hit first. We put $1.9 trillion into the government or into the economy when President Biden took office. And we have inflation, the only defense for which is to slow the economy down, flirting with recession. By the way, have you noticed that the information regarding the inflation rate has disappeared off the pages of the newspapers? Maybe that's because it's not going anywhere and the election season has started. Oh my. Oh my. It's clear that not every Republican is on board, and there are a lot of Republicans saying, no, we don't need to do this. I like the idea that they're going to freeze government spending, but then they raise the credit limit. One major complaint lodged by Midwestern Republicans is a provision that would repeal tax credits for biofuels like ethanol, which would be a significant blow to corn-heavy districts in states like Iowa. Dusty Johnson, a Republican from South Dakota, told Fox News there were maybe 6, 7, or 8 who are more concerned about that provision. Well, once again, why is the government subsidizing corn? Why is the government, imposing itself on what the makeup of fuel in the United States is? These are things that are not in the Constitution of the United States but have yet been a bulwark of American government for decades. The government of the United States is too big. It doesn't work well enough. It is disastrous to the budget. And all of these things are proven. Federal government of the United States needs to simply stop. But we don't have the people in place to do it. We just don't have the people in place to do it. Government spending happens without regard for the actual money coming into the government. And then when they run out of money, they ask to be able to raise the debt. When people say, no, we're not going to raise the debt limit, the immediate response is, well, you're trying to get the country to default. Every time you decide to spend another $1 trillion, you're pushing the government to default. And we, the people, aren't doing that. Politicians are doing that, of both parties. The Republican Party says, hey, we're working on trying to keep this under control, trying to get the federal spending under control. Oh, but we're raising the debt limit another $1.5 trillion. Well, instead of trying to stop something, how about if you stop something? If you're trying to get the country to have a more responsible fiscal outlook, how about stop being irresponsible? How about that? Government needs to stop spending. And of course, this corn thing, removes government subsidies, which shouldn't be there in the first place. Iowa's congressional delegation were seen entering McCarthy's office early in the evening yesterday. Johnson, Derek Van Orden, Michelle Fischbach, Ways and Means Chair Jason Smith were silent upon leaving the office. GOP leaders released an amendment overnight that keeps 2 of the 5 biofuel tax credits in place and addressed conservative lawmakers' concerns by requiring tougher work requirements for receiving food stamps and other benefits starting in 2024 instead of 2025. And they were pressing ahead with a vote that could take place as late as Friday, apparently confident those tweaks would be enough to get the bill over the finish line. It's still not working. We're still screwing ourselves over. This is bad. This is bad. By the way, I'm quoting from a Fox News article. Representative Nancy Mace, the Republican from South Carolina, called the bill's spending caps weak in comments to reporters and took issue with how leadership went about putting the bill together. There was no input from the conference or from the members. It was all done behind closed doors. Sounds very much like Nancy Pelosi's work, doesn't it? And they put this bill in front of Republicans and expect them to vote for it. Now they're getting feedback from those that matter because there's a very slim majority, and we shouldn't be doing this in the 11th hour. What we should be doing is we should work to stay away from the debt limit so we don't have to raise it. McCarthy's allies optimistic. Representative Garrett Graves of Louisiana gave Fox News a firm yes when he asked if the bill would be up for a vote today as he entered McCarthy's office. So they're still having conversations about getting to 218 votes. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer of Minnesota told reporters on the way into the Speaker's chamber, we are going to pass it tomorrow. Others, like House Freedom Caucus Chair Scott Perry, said the bill was still potentially evolving. He didn't say how he was going to vote. However, another leader of the conservative group, Chip Roy of Texas, wrote in an op-ed in The Federalist earlier touting the legislation. He told reporters yesterday afternoon, most people are pretty happy with the product. Well, let me ask you this question. Why should the people of the United States be happy with the product, as well as all these people in the parties? Why? You'll note, by the way, Democrats totally silent on this. Why? Because they're getting what they want. Thanks to Republicans. So, once again, we have a circumstance where, thankfully, the Republican Party does not have a broad majority in the House of Representatives. So they actually have to work with each other and make decisions that the Republican Party just isn't good at making. Conference Chair Mike Johnson, that the deal makers were done negotiating on the bill's contents, but revealed that its road to passing the chamber would be complicated because of a few absences on the GOP side. Here we go. Democrats silent, that's always a bad sign. That's how Fox reported it. On the other hand, CNN says it this way. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and his top allies have reversed course, changed their bill for raising the nation's borrowing limit, and agreed to make 2 major changes to pass the package. It's not clear if those changes will yield enough support to pass the bill. McCarthy can only lose 4 votes in a narrowly divided House. Yet after days of proclaiming that the bill was final, no changes would be made, leadership caved, realizing that without tweaks, the bill didn't have a chance. Passing the measure is mainly aimed at boosting McCarthy's negotiating stance with Democrats, as both the White House, issued a veto threat for the legislation. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer described the bill as dead on arrival. Still, if McCarthy can unite his conference, force a bill through the chamber, it would be a symbolic win for GOP leadership. Okay, great. But what about the country? So we got all these politicians getting what they want. Democrats get what they want thanks to Republicans. Republicans are getting what they want because, well, they want a legislative win for Kevin McCarthy. Meanwhile, the people that actually pay the bills, we're just hanging out, watching to see just exactly how close to financial ruin these people can get before they stop. Because sooner or later, the big crunch at the end of the rainbow appears. And with every $1 trillion bill, this one $1.5 trillion, we get closer. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We lost a couple of people this week, and I want to chat about a couple of them. One of them was Dancing with the Stars' Len Goodman. He was the senior judge on a very popular program, one that I've enjoyed over the years. Len Goodman passed away peacefully, said his manager Jackie Gill in a USA Today article. He died Saturday night with his wife Sue Barrett and his son James from a previous relationship by his bedside. The former ballroom dancer was a beloved husband, father, grandfather who will be missed by those who knew him. He was previously diagnosed with bone cancer. He was the head judge of Dancing with the Stars since 2005. And he was always very straightforward in his judging and his commentary. He's a professional ballroom dancer, a British champion. He was also head judge on Strictly Come Dancing for 12 years from its launch on the BBC in 2004. Dancing with the Stars is a dance competition, as you know, that pairs celebrities with professional dance partners. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to watch and see how people actually progress, because that's tough. You know, you see those ballroom dancers and you just sit there and say, yeah, you know, they're just dancing. Try it. Another person we lost was Harry Belafonte. And so in 1950s and 60s America, Black entertainers had a tough row to gain national prominence. Cool confidence, magnetic charm, an armload of wistful Caribbean folk songs. Calypso. Harry Belafonte beat the odds. First black man to win a Tony. The first black man to win an Emmy. The first artist to record an album that sold 1 million copies. Well aware of his battles to be fought, Belafonte became a civil rights activist, a confidant of the Reverend Martin Luther King, and he became a globe-trotting humanitarian. As he got older, he became more and more communist, to the point that he was a full-on, honest-to-goodness devotee of communism. Belafonte died Tuesday at his home yesterday in New York of congestive heart failure. His wife, Pamela, was at his side. He was 96. He fueled the international calypso craze in the 50s with the Banana Boat song, Day-O. You can still hear it at a baseball game. Described in Look magazine in 1957 as the first black matinee idol in entertainment history, tall, trim, smoothly handsome, and incredibly talented. What a great singer he was. In 1954, he won a Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Musical for his performance in the Broadway revue, John Murray Anderson's Almanac. 6 years later, he won an Emmy for his performance in the Revlon Revue, Tonight with Belafonte. 1956 album Calypso, which included Jamaica Farewell, Day-O, his version of the Banana Boat song, charted at number 1 for 31 weeks. Whoa. As far as black entertainers were concerned, Belafonte in many ways seemed to be a startling new kind of figure, said Donald Bogle, culture critic, author of numerous books on black Americans in film and television. There hasn't been anybody quite like him on the scene. Television. He brought his music to television, had a vast audience. People could see him. You got a sense of his attraction. Women loved him. Men felt comfortable with Belafonte as well. He was one of a number of popular black entertainers and actors, including Sammy Davis Jr., Eartha Kitt, Dorothy Dandridge, Sidney Poitier, who emerged at the same time. Diane Carroll described him as the most beautiful man I ever set eyes on. Also visible on the big screen in a handful of movies in the 50s. He made his movie debut in 1953 as a Southern School principal opposite Dandridge's teacher in Bright Road. He starred with the actress in the hit 1954 musical Carmen Jones. He broke another culture barrier in 1957 when he became the first black American actor to play a romantic lead in a feature movie opposite a white leading lady, Joan Fontaine, in Island in the Sun. Filmmakers would not allow Belafonte and Fontaine to kiss, nor was their relationship fully explored. And he went through his life, through the 60s and so on. Inspired by the Irish songwriter Bob Geldof's Band Aid charity supergroup, whose single Do They Know It's Christmas raised money for famine relief, Belafonte contacted talent manager Ken Cragen, proposed doing a similar project in the United States. We Are the World raised millions for famine relief. He was appointed a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador in 1987, was a 1989 recipient of the Kennedy Center Honor, and a toast to Belafonte during the black tie tribute. Then Senator Edward Kennedy said the entertainer has given nobly and unselfishly to the cause of making our country a better place and our planet a better world. Many great artists have a conscience too, but none greater than his. At 96, we lost Harry Belafonte. And at 79, we lost the amazing Len Goodman. Times change. And so it goes. This has been the Wells Report for today. Thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it very much. Yvonne says, great show, JD. Have a wonderful day. You too, Evie. You have a good one. And I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow for another edition of the Wells Report, where we bring you the news, analysis, commentary, and debate. You deserve the facts, and we're going to give them to you right here. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Make good decisions. Be safe. And there you go. Thank you so much for being with us today. I sincerely appreciate it. And now I got to go do my day job. See you at Defender Outdoors.